When we go in search of ways to improve our photography, we're often pointed in the direction of better gear, a greater understanding of camera settings and mastery of composition. But I think the one skill that all photographers need to have that's often forgotten about is the skill of observation. In this video, I'm going to share with you 3 practical ways in which you can improve your observation skills and show that when you put them into practice, you'll make much better photographs for it. Recently, I headed to New Mills on the edge of the Peak District to put my own observation skills to the test in a location that I'd never been to before. The first way which we can practically improve our observation skills is to do a little bit of preliminary research before you head out to photograph a specific location or subject. As well as having an idea of what you'd like to photograph when you get there in mind, this is going to hone your attention and observation skills when you actually get there to find the things that interest you and that you want to photograph. My first port of call is usually Google Maps to have an idea of where I want to explore when I get to the location, and also have a look at Street View where it's available to just have a look around to see if anything catches my eye. I'll also do some image searches on photo sharing platforms like Flickr. Not only will this help me to see what other people have picked up on and observed in the location that I'm heading to, it might also pick out things that are a bit repetitive that people have photographed to death, so therefore I can avoid those things and train my observation on things that might stand out a little bit differently. The second way we can improve our observation skills is to not start taking photographs straight away when we get to our location. Having a wander round and looking at the landscape with our physical eyes rather than through a viewfinder or staring at the screen on the back of the camera can just help us get more of a feel for a place. When I got to New Mills, I spent the first hour and a half of my time there without my camera, just wandering through these gorges, looking at the viaducts and the various different levels and points of interest that caught my attention along the way. At this stage, of course, I wasn't having to think about what camera settings I would need to take specific photographs, or indeed how I would compose them. I was just relying on my observation skills to make mental notes of things that stood out to me along the way. I think we can sometimes bombard ourselves with too much to think about when we take photographs. So just having this fluid process of walking around and taking mental notes can really help, because we're not concentrating on the paraphernalia that goes around photography. We're just relying on our own instincts to spark our imagination and hopefully spark some potential photographs. The third way, and maybe the most important way to improve our observation skills, is to break down and compartmentalize what we see. If I asked you to describe this photograph, you might say something along the lines of it's a contrasty scene with trees on the horizon line framing a house with a chimney on it on the top of a hill, all set in front of an overcast sky. And of course, you'd be right. But to really improve our observation skills, we have to look beyond the superficial labels that we give to things and look to what I call the 5 form elements. These are light, colour, texture, line and shape. So instead of just seeing a house behind some trees on a hill underneath an overcast sky, we can start to look a little bit deeper. We can pick up maybe a little bit more on the contrast, which is stark between the lightness of the sky and the darkness of the land and everything else that's silhouetted against it. We can maybe pick up on the difference between the lines in the photograph, with the strong horizontal line of the dark black horizon reaching down and curving slightly at the bottom left-hand corner, to the human-made straight lines of the house in contrast to the slightly higgledy-piggledy natural lines of the trees. We can pick up on the fact that this photograph is black and white, where I've decided to ignore any colour detail to draw your eye more towards that stark contrast and the light and shade that makes the mood and atmosphere and gives this photograph interest. And we can also look to the textures of the fluffiness of the overcast sky, to the quite skeletal and pointy nature of the trees, to the very flat looking nature of the landscape that's silhouetted against the sky beyond. I know it might sound difficult, but to actually do this out in the field when we're observing potential photographs can really help. Because instead of seeing our subject matter that might have sparked our interest in the first place, we start breaking these things down into these 5 form elements. And this not only helps us to maybe gather some intent for the photograph, but also helps us to compose it by balancing different elements and making sure that the scene that we're presenting is coherent. The photographer Elliot Erwitt once said, "To me, photography is an art of observation. It's about finding something interesting in an ordinary place. I've found it has little to do with the things you see and everything to do with the way you see them." If you went to New Mills, you'd see exactly what I saw. The viaducts, the mills, the gorges, the river, the weir, the houses, the trees. But the thing is, we all interpret these things in ever so slightly different ways. So going in with that preliminary research, knowing exactly what it is that you want to photograph, when you get to your location, wandering round and getting a feel for it yourself, looking at what catches your eye and making sure that you look all around. To when it comes to taking those photographs, compartmentalising what you see in front of you. Instead of seeing trees, houses, viaducts, gorges and rivers, seeing lines, shapes, textures, colours and how the light interacts with all of those things will not only do our location justice, but we'll find a way of making it interesting from our own unique perspectives. As Elliot Erwitt suggests, no matter how ordinary the location is that you're photographing, the way that you see it can make or break it from a photography perspective. So, how observant are you? If you think you're really observant, then you'll be able to tell me in the comments section below how many different flat caps I've worn throughout the duration of this video. If you haven't been paying close attention, then next time you head out with your camera, make sure that you put those 3 practical ways of improving your photography observation skills into practice. And I guarantee that not only will you be a more observant photographer, you'll also make much better photographs for it. Make sure that you've liked this video and subscribed if you haven't already done so, and watch this video next if you want more practical photography advice.